I only saw this because it's like on Twitter or whatever, but like specifically the model that they are using for Peter Griffin in Fortnite is like a buff Peter Griffin. Oh, hello, and welcome to Crying in the Book Club, the hit new podcast where three emotional friends talk about comic books that make them emotional. I am your host, Emily, and I am here, as always, with Jean-Luc. Hi, Jean-Luc.
Hi, Emily. How's it going?
I'm doing all right. And we're also here with Alex. Hi, Alex.
Hey, Emily. How goes?
How goes? Indeed. Late night recording, at least for us.
It's early for me. 7:15, baby.
Well, you live 2 hours away from me, and that's
I think I live a lot more than
away
2 hours
Alex.
away from you, and I definitely live more than 3 hours away from Alex.
That's not what I meant.
I tried to go see Alex earlier this year, and it would have taken me way more than 3 hours to get there. So
I meant time zones.
Jean-Luc also would have had to watch Overwatch. So
yeah, that would have been unfortunate. But that would have sucked.
Womp womp. We are here to talk about the hit comic book Invincible. And so we're going to be doing spoilers for the first 3 volumes of Invincible. What issue does that go up to?
15, I think. I think they're 5-issue. I think they're 5-issue trades.
They are very short, easy breezy, beautiful cover girl trades to read.
We might also spoil stuff beyond Volume 3 because there's a question that Emily put in the document about Invincible getting bad, which so I might have to say some things about things that happen later in Invincible. Sure. But also we might talk about more Invincible at some point, so maybe I'll save it. But
yeah, that was just I was trying to come up with questions, and that was just something
I read.
It's a good question.
Volumes, it's something, and it gets already weird. So
it's something that I was curious about because I only read the 3 volumes that we said we were going to read for this episode, and that's all that I've read, and that's all that the first season of the animated show covers, which is...
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have not...
Oh my god, I nailed it. I haven't seen the animated series, but I just nailed it with what I...
Oh, yeah, you really did,
decided
actually.
To read.
If I remember correctly, it has been a little bit since I watched the last episode of season 1 of Invincible, and I have not been keeping up with the new season for various reasons, but I intend to watch it at some point. I just haven't gotten to it. But I am pretty sure that it's about the same ending, so that's fun. But yeah, we're talking about Invincible, a coming-of-age superhero comic written by Robert Kirkman and illustrated by Cory Walker and Ryan Ottley, published by Image Comics from January 2003 to February 2018. That's a long-ass time. The series is known for its graphic violence. We don't have a lot of background info on Invincible. I mostly did like some cursory wiki reading and stuff, if there's anything in like interviews about the origins of the ideas for Invincible or whatever. I didn't find it in my very basic research.
She didn't want to abuse our research intern and make them, go out and do in-depth, groundwork to get background info, which fair enough. It's nice that at least one of the hosts has like some respect for labor standards. When I'm the host, I'm whipping that guy like 18 hours a day doing research on the background for books, which is, it sometimes comes up with gems, like the fact that, you know, the writer of The Crow, you know, was the guy who gave My Chemical Romance their first shot at a record label. But that's, you know, true. Sometimes you don't get anything out of it. So
I could have gone through and read some Robert Kirkman interviews, but I figured, like, if there was nothing written about the background of the comic on, like, the Wikipedia page or the fan wiki, like, yeah, like how much could there really be out there, I guess.
You can find some crazy shit in archive.org interviews with some people, with some comic book writers, but that's yeah, I don't know. Maybe he's never talked about Invincible. He's probably too busy talking about The Walking Dead.
I mean, honestly,
that's fair.
But yeah, so as far as like the plot of Invincible, it is about Mark Grayson, the son of Omni-Man, the most powerful superhero on the planet. Mark and his father are it's Viltrumites. I'm gonna have to say that a lot, I guess. They're extraterrestrials from the planet Viltrum. Although Mark has a human mother, his DNA is essentially pure Viltrumite. I guess I mean that's what Omni-Man says, and, you know, I don't know that I guess I'm inclined to believe him on that point, but, you know, what can we really know?
It is more or less true that Viltrumite semen is so powerful that it overwrites any other piece of, like, DNA that it interacts
That is with. What he says, for sure, and I guess, like, we have no reason to take that as
you know why?
Canonical.
Because there's a line where Omni-Man is like, you know, on Viltrum, we don't have sex for pleasure. It's just purely for recreation. So he was just like a god of semen retention until he met his human wife. And that just made his sperm so strong that he produced a child with, despite mating with a human, the child had no human DNA. Mm-hmm. So if you want to create a clone of yourself, you should, you know, just retain for decades or centuries, and you can do that.
That's what I learned from Invincible. I don't want to have children. When Mark starts displaying powers of his own at age 17, his father reveals their alien origins and takes Mark under his wing to become the hero Invincible. The first 3 volumes focus on Mark learning the ropes of becoming a superhero, both on his own and as backup for Omni-Man. Over the course of these 3 volumes, challenges Mark faces include discovering his physics teacher has been turning some of his fellow students into human bombs, preventing the creation of an army of robots, fighting and then befriending a representative from the Coalition of Planets, who is my favorite character. Spoiler for another question that I'm going to ask later. My favorite character, my boyfriend, Alan the Alien. And also, Mark learns the horrible truth about why his father really came to Earth. The last volume we read ends with Omni-Man having fled Earth, with Mark taking up his father's position as a superhero working with the United States government. I forgot to add that the reason that Omni-Man fled Earth is that he basically slaughtered the entire Justice League, in-universe Justice League, as part of his plan for the Viltrumite invasion. I had like a note about the invasion in there at one point, and I meant to rewrite it, and I think I just never put it back in. But yeah, so that's volumes 1 through 3 of Invincible. So, what is everyone's respective history with this comic? I had not read it. I had only watched season 1 of the animated show, and I was interested in reading some of the comics, so that's why I put it on our list, and that's why we read it.
No, Alex is shaking his head. No history with Invincible.
I had seen clips on Twitter of the animated show, specifically the one where Ultraman kills a bunch of people, including the fish guy. I think he puts like a fist through his head or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow. And I'd heard about Invincible before, but I read the first 100 issues of The Walking Dead. I think I had two of those big compendiums, and Invincible was always this, like, for me, it was always the B series. I'm like, why would you read the Invincible when you could read The Walking Dead? Really Robert Kirkman doesn't even care about that series. But I mean, I he cared about it enough.
There is some truth to that.
To write 144 issues or something like that. So I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, no real idea of what the quality of this would be either. Like, I liked The Walking Dead when I read it. I haven't read it in probably like 8 years or something. But yeah, I went into it sort of like skeptical and expecting to see a lot of gore, and I didn't see as much as I was expecting to. So
yeah, I read Invincible until the very bad scene that is notorious that I assume neither of you know about. And then, like many people, I stopped reading Invincible shortly after that happened, which was like issue 100 and early hundreds.
If I remember to ask you when this episode is done recording, will you tell me what the scene is?
I can tell you what it is. I can say it when we get to talking about this book becoming very, very bad.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Sure. Yeah,
but,
we can do that.
It's not funny.
Sure. Just like, my curiosity will kill me.
Yeah. But yeah, I binge read like the first 70 or 80 issues of Invincible in like 2014 or 2015 or something like that. Probably 2014.
I can see how, because like these first 3 volumes are like incredibly, I mean,
it's awesome.
They're short, but like but they're also like really easy to read. Like,
oh yeah, the first, I want to say maybe 40, 50 issues are very reminiscent of like Bendis's Ultimate Spider-Man and sort of stuff like in that oeuvre of like early 2000s comics.
I saw like I briefly skimmed past like a Goodreads review of one of these volumes where someone described Invincible as what would happen if Peter Parker became Superman.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's
and I thought
like
that was a cute way of describing this.
It's super accessible for new readers. It's like clearly written for a younger audience. Like, I think when Robert Kirkman writes this, he's a younger dude. Well, obviously younger than he is now, but like I think he was probably in his 20s or so when he wrote Invincible. So it's like super easy to get through and like to just shotgun a bunch of it. Like, I read the first 3 volumes and I was like, oh my God, I forgot this book used to be good, and read like another volume and a half afterwards because I was like, yeah, Invincible for a long time is a really awesome book. I agree with Alex that it's always had the reputation as like the B tier Robert Kirkman book. Like The Walking Dead was always like, and I think this is in part because of the TV show, but also just because it was like grittier and more serious. Like Invincible is funny for a lot of its early run. It is like kind of irreverent about like the superhero, the like DC and Marvel superhero comics lore. I mean, like the big twist is that you have this great issue where they set up like this is our fake Justice League. Look how awesome they are. And then they just all get butchered at the end, and like, they sure do. Which is when you're like 17, you're like, that's so cool. Like, how did Robert Kirkman get away with that? And even now, I'm like, that's still like a great twist. Like, I love that issue. So I don't know. Like, I have a long history with Invincible. I kind of just was so out of it that I had no interest in watching the TV show. I still kind of don't, but after reading this, I'm a little more inclined to go back and watch it because it was kind of a reminder. Like, this book gets so dour, and I don't want to dwell too much on stuff we didn't read, but this book gets so dour and like becomes such a slog.
We'll talk about it
later on in its run, that like it's nice to be reminded that this book was really good at one point, and there's a reason that I read a lot of it and liked it a lot when I was younger.
Yeah, I basically like I had never heard of this book before the animated show came out. Like, not not even like when it was announced or anything. Like literally, like the show came out, and this is how I found out about Invincible. Just and I read a lot of The Walking Dead when I was in like late high school or like early like community college. I read a lot of The Walking Dead, but like I just never.
It really surprises me because I feel like this was something that, like, if you were around comics at all, like especially in like the late 2000s, early 2010s, like you would have heard about it. But yeah,
no, just somehow just never was on my radar at all, like at all. And so I watched this show because I wasn't like that interested in watching the show, but then I was like hanging out with a couple of friends, and one of them had wanted to watch the first episode of Invincible, so like they put it on, and the I guess spoiler for the show, but the end of the first episode is when they do the like when you see the twist of Omni-Man like killing the Justice League.
Oh wow.
No. That's
so soon.
That's
yeah,
soon.
I also, having read the comic now, feel like it's like super soon. Like it doesn't feel that bad when you're watching the show, because like that's just sort of like that's kind of your like, you get like that gut punch at the end of the episode, like, oh, this is what you're in for with Invincible, is like you're occasionally going to get this intense gore. And so it kind of works, but I also feel like it's super soon, and I wish that they had maybe done something else. It feels like they put that in there for like the shock value. I know that they like debuted that clip at like a Comic-Con, and Robert Kirkman was like super delighted about it because it's fucking the way that they do this, the scene is fucking brutal.
Is it cool?
Honestly, like, I mean, the show is good. Like, I can't deny that. Like, I really enjoyed watching season 1 of the show. So, like,
it's way more like it's like a good 2-minute scene, whereas this one, I think it takes place across like 2 pages or something. Like, it's not a lot at all in the comics.
It's pretty gratuitous in the show, and it is like, it serves as like your moment of like, something's fucked up with I don't remember exactly how it plays out, because it's been like 2 years since I watched the first episode, but it's like your first moment, like something's fucked up with Omni-Man, and also like that this show is gonna probably go places that you don't expect a brightly colored superhero show to go. So, you know, like, I don't know. It kind of works. I kind of wish that they had gone about it a little differently. But,
I think they wait till issue 11 until they show Omni-Man doing it in the comics.
Yeah, it is. It's the end of the second arc.
But you have, like, there are, like, hints before
well, you know they're dead in issue 7. You don't know how they died, though, I think, is the...
Well,
what I remember, right?
It obviously it hints at it being Omni-Man because he keeps doing that thing where he, like... he's like, oh, I have to talk to Mark about something, but he won't say what.
Yeah.
And then it does the misdirection with the Butler character. So it kind of tries to keep its cards closer to the chest, but yeah, it doesn't actually do the full reveal until later. I remember reading it the first time, and I knew the twist going in. But I guess I didn't know the specifics. I knew that Omni-Man was evil, and I remember the first time I was reading it that, like, I thought that he didn't kill the Guardians, because I actually thought the twist would come later on, but then it obviously happens there. I can't speak to the show and how the show is paced, but it's like, feels weird to do it so soon, because so much of those first few issues is like hinged on, well, this is mostly a normal family, right?
Yeah.
Where, you have two parents and a son who mostly like get along and like each other, and obviously he's the strongest person on earth, so he does some stuff that's pretty crazy. But
I mean, like, I should have maybe rewatched the first episode before I try to talk about it, but there's like a half chance that they don't actually reveal that it's Omni-Man in that first episode, and they maybe just like
I'm watching it right now
or whatever. Or do you see him? I like
the Amazon Prime video is titled "The Totally Unexpected" from ending from episode 1 of Invincible.
Yeah,
and you just see Omni-Man at the end, like.
Okay. Yeah, it's
crushing the Flash's head. Well, not the Flash, but between his.
It's been 2 years since I watched that first episode, so I just literally I don't remember how the scene plays out. But yeah, okay, so yeah, they pull the reveal super early, and it's super like edgelordy the way that it plays out. I still, like I said, I enjoyed the show. So I didn't hate the way it played out in the show, but like reading the comic, I kind of wish that they had held it a little closer to the chest a little longer, because it also meant that because I had seen the show, even if I had just watched episode 1 of the show and wanted to go read the comic, like that reveal is just totally gone. There was like no suspense lead up to that. But anyway, yeah, so but what are your guys' history with Robert Kirkman in general? Alex, you said you read The Walking Dead?
Yeah, I read 100 or so issues. I stopped reading Walking Dead at spoiler, like the part where I think Glenn dies. Yeah, which was also just the part where the trade ended and the other one wasn't out yet. But it was like, oh, okay, I don't know. Like, but by that point of Walking Dead, I can't speak to Invincible. It was kind of like, you're so deep. There's not really much more that it feels you can do. There's been so many major like bad guys and stuff that it's like, maybe this series should end. And I think Walking Dead got 300 issues, or am I thinking of something else?
Not quite that many, but it got more than Invincible.
By the way, I did the
193.
I did the math. I meant to bring this up. I did the math, and Robert Kirkman would have been 25 when Invincible was like beginning publication. So that's like where he was at.
Yeah. I also read The Walking Dead a little further than Glenn dying. I read most of like the All Out War arc, but I don't know. I kind of felt the same way about it as Alex at the time, that like Robert Kirkman ran out of ideas at some point for The Walking Dead, and it was all just like, we're gonna have new versions of the governor who are more violent and more quirked up. Like, we're just going to get more quirked up white boys to do extreme acts of violence. And I'm like, I'm in for that, but, not do something different.
Yeah.
I wish he made good on the April Fool's issue where he revealed that it was like aliens who caused the virus. But unfortunately,
I didn't know about that.
Went back to that. It's a great issue. Yeah.
Fucking coward. I read a bunch of The Walking Dead. I don't remember where the hell I fell off. I don't think I made it to issue 100 exactly, but like I feel like I got close. I don't remember. But I read a bunch of The Walking Dead. Like I said, Invincible was just not on my radar at all somehow.
I've read some of his more recent stuff too. There was that book where there was like the sun went out or something. We read that for the comics podcast, and I did not like it. It was called like Outcast or something like that.
Yeah.
He's had like a couple new things now that Invincible and The Walking Dead are done, but like none of them have had the magic of the early days of those series, in my opinion.
But so it's like, more power to him for like making The Walking Dead, which probably made him like so many millions of dollars overall with TV rights and
like literally like that's gonna pay for everything for the rest of his life. Like they're never gonna stop making things of The Walking Dead, even if there's not a show going.
You can watch this spinoff where Daryl somehow floats across the entire Atlantic Ocean and winds up in France.
I mean that's all I needed to know. That's great.
That is real.
That's fantastic.
Jesus Christ.
That's wow.
Yeah, more power to him, I guess.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what Robert Kirkman is mostly credited for, is like developing the sort of model of like using Image Comics and other like creator-owned stuff to create your own IP, and because there's no money in comics, you then sell that IP to movie studios. I mean, Brian K. Vaughan did that.
Mark Millar.
Around the same time, that's like
I was
Mark
going to say
Millar's.
Mark Millar.
Yeah, that's
he's like a less shitty
like,
Mark Millar, you know? It's like kind of
Mark Millar's like the number one guy who's like really done that.
Yeah, which is like
other
you got to give Mark Millar credit in some respects for opening that pathway to creators, but you don't have to give him any credit for any of the work he's done. So
under no
you have to give him
circumstances,
credit for some of the work, but
under no circumstances do you gotta hand it to Mark Millar.
Oh, Mark Millar, yeah, absolutely not. Robert Kirkman, I think I'll defend Robert Kirkman's early output.
Sure.
As we continue talking about Invincible, I will be defending it.
Yeah.
Today, Mark Millar and Ethan Van Sciver had a nice online interaction.
Wait, today?
Wait, did they really?
Today, yeah. I don't know. It was something like, I don't know. I think Ethan Van Sciver complimented him, and he was like, "Thanks, bud." So, I don't know. Doesn't have anything to do with it, but Invincible.
Anyway, I really enjoyed. I cannot overstate that I really enjoyed reading these 3 volumes of Invincible. I had a grand old time. Who's you guys' favorite character in Invincible? There are a lot of characters, even though like there's only a couple like main characters, but we have quite a cast of interesting people.
I like the super secret, not CIA because he's higher than the CIA, and he talks to the president, but not always because sometimes the president doesn't know he's there.
Cecil.
Yeah, he's great. Like after our good friend Mark gets like the shit kicked out of him by his dad, Cecil comes and does this like 300-word monologue to him about who he is and what he does, and Mark's just lying there, and he's like, "Oh, I'll come back later," because he's just like. He just got the shit beat out of him by his dad, and he like totally didn't read the room. And he just hangs out. It's cool.
Yeah, Cecil's. I like Cecil.
Is it Cecil? I
think that's how it's pronounced. Cecil, whatever.
He's not real. So.
Well, I mean, there is also the animated show, which presumably has like a pronunciation, but I don't remember what it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that name can be pronounced either way, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
I like Mark. My favorite character hasn't been introduced in these 3 volumes, but of the characters who have been introduced, I've always liked Mark. Like I think he's a great superhero protagonist. I mean, kind of by the numbers in some ways in terms of like discovering his powers, but I find his, sort of coming to terms with the reveal about his dad to be very compelling. Not like some of that is here. It goes on into the next few volumes as well, but I don't know. I always liked Mark.
Who's your actual favorite character that hasn't been
his brother, who is his half brother, who is Omni-Man's other son.
That's fun.
Yeah, so Omni-Man had another son with a woman of a different species. And the twist there is that like the other species ages faster than humans, and Omni-Man's species ages slower than humans. So he kind of ends up. I guess that was before Omni-Man really got into semen retention. So Oliver ages like at the pace of a normal of a human.
Yeah, I was gonna say like
he
probably like splits the difference and ages normal.
Yeah. But I always liked him.
What's his name?
Oliver. He also is Kid Omni-Man at one point in the comics. So he's a fun character. I liked him a lot. I think he gets introduced relatively shortly after what we read. I don't remember exactly, but he's a good character. I like his relationship with Mark. That's fun. I like him a lot.
Yeah, I like that. Of the characters that we've been introduced to, I don't say that as in like I have a favorite that hasn't been introduced because I've only read this, but just of the characters we have, I guess Mark probably because like he's just sort of best boy, but also I really like his gay best friend who hasn't come out as gay yet, I guess, or I don't know. He's gay in the TV show. Is he gay in the comic at all? Can either of you verify?
Is he? Who's that?
The
William,
best friend,
right?
William. Yeah.
Yeah. No, he is gay in the comic.
Okay.
It happens. It does happen later. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
Nice.
it didn't happen in the volumes that we read. So like I wasn't 100% if that was like an Amazon change or whatever.
No. I guess they just do that.
I like him a lot. I think he's cute.
You like the whole bit where he like gets really mad when people ask if they can call him Will or Bill.
No,
this is definitely a Robert Kirkman thing.
No,
100%.
Yeah, I took a screen cap of that and I posted on my comics Twitter. I'm pretty sure that's just Robert Kirkman working through his own shit about people wanting to call him Bob, I guess.
Yeah. I think stuff like that is fun, though. I think like that's a good microcosm of like the book's sense of humor in the early issues. That is like, I don't know, it's not like
it's
groundbreaking, but it's goofy in a way that I do appreciate. Like, it's a nice bit of levity.
Yeah, I like, even though it like was kind of a moment that made me like kind of roll my eyes, I also enjoyed it. So what did you guys think of the art? There are two different artists in the comics that we read, and I don't know. I mostly like the art in Invincible. Some of the style sometimes is not like. I kind of they really smoothed out but also kind of they smoothed out some of the kinks of the art style in making the art for the animated show, but also kind of it has a little bit more of an air of like the and John, you'll know what I'm talking about because when I say the house style for the DC animated films.
Oh Jesus!
It's not like I don't mean that in like a bad way, but just they like the way that they have translated the style looks a little bit more polished. The way that like those DC animated films are trying to be.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you guys think of the art in this book? Because like I actually, when I was looking for things to include in the notes, like I saw really polarized opinions on the art. It seemed like there were people who either felt like it was like really good or like really bad.
That's kind of interesting because I feel like Ryan Otley is like beloved.
Mm-hmm.
And he does become the main artist. Like he draws everything after. I saw volume 3 it switches over. So at some point in volume 2 or 3 it switches to Otley. But
yeah, like in the reactions I saw that like people were like the second artist is so much better.
Yeah, well, I don't think he's like so much better personally, but I do love Ryan Otley. I think his style is really fun. It's like cartoony. He's a good cartoonist. Like the book is cartoony when it needs to be.
Yeah.
It doesn't like it looks like it uses like visual language that is recognizable as like being from superhero comics and inspired by superhero comics, but not like, it doesn't look like a Jim Lee book or, it doesn't look like it's a Marvel House style kind of book, Yeah. And so like I really like his work. I think it's silly and fun when it needs to be. He's very expressive in terms of like drawing characters and the way that he has like characters act on the page, which I think is great for superhero books.
Yeah.
And he's really good at like the sort of melodrama stuff too. Like there's a lot of like scenes, especially of the mom, where her body language is just very clear that she's like extremely over her son and husband being superheroes.
Oh my God.
And I think that's fun. And I think he's great at drawing action scenes too. Like I think there's a lot of like fight scenes that are really kinetic and look really good. The use of like very simple like speed lines is nice because it doesn't feel like they're like blowing up the page with them, but it does convey motion in a way that I really like. I can say a lot of really good things about Ryan Otley as an artist. I really like his work.
I'd say all that, and then just really cool designs for the superheroes, and it makes them feel like, clearly like Justice League knockoffs, but like still like super cool. When they die, it's like, oh no. And also like, just the villains he's got in there, and the everyday people. And I love the arc where we already talked about it, but the teacher starts like putting bombs in kids and blowing them up. And then there's this guy who survives it all, but he's still kind of got like the bomb in him, or like the structure, and he's just walking around.
He's just got like a metal torso.
He sure do.
I agree with that. I really like that. Like a lot of the alien species that you see in some of the other superheroes are very like grokkable. They're very pulpy and recognizable in sort of like Western pop culture. Mm-hmm. But still look really they still have like really interesting looks and aesthetics. Mm-hmm. It's one of the things that like I think other books that are doing like trying to do like Marvel or DC sort of analogs often can get wrong is that they either err too close to the original designs, or they go maybe too far afield, or just in general like don't feel unique enough. Like there's a couple characters in The Boys, for instance, that just look way too close to their analogs.
Yeah, I have a question. We can kind of skip a little. I have a question here about like how you guys feel Invincible stacks up to other like quote unquote realistic superhero comics like Watchmen and The Boys. I guess like those are the two like big examples I can think of, but they're not the only.
It's weird to call it less cynical, because I don't know what the hell happens here, and Omni-Man like kills a bunch of people and stuff, but like Mark being the heart of this series, it's like like all the stuff he's through.
Less cynical than definitely The Boys as a comic.
Well, and Watchmen's not exactly a cheery trip.
But it is less cynical than Watchmen as well.
Oh yeah,
definitely way less cynical than The Boys.
Yeah. The whole like Omni-Man is very clearly like the Superman stand-in, although there's also the Immortal, who is kind of another Superman stand-in.
Sure.
But I think because of the way the reveal works in this book and how early on it is, like within the first dozen or so issues, like you never really get the true like analogs for, well-known DC characters. Like, I mean, they all get killed off at the Guardians all die immediately. Like there's like a Martian Manhunter, a Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern. Well, the Aquaman one is very obviously just like a joke about how stupid Aquaman is, which is funny, but you never really get that. It's kind of like you instantly get moved towards like the second generation of superheroes, which is, I think, a very compelling way to do it. Like I kind of like it. That is sort of also the Watchmen thing, where you get thrown in and it's like you're interacting with the second, or in some cases even the third generation of superheroes in that universe. Yep. But this is a much sort of brighter version of it, at least at the beginning. It's way more in line with like classic like Silver and even Bronze Age comics, where it has like the melodrama and the angst, but also is willing to be silly and have fun, even though it can, as we see towards the end of this, like turn on a dime and be like really violent and brutal as well. I mean, that Omni-Man Invincible fight is still just like, I mean, it's kind of tough to look at sometimes. Like it is cartoony, but it is really violent.
Oh yeah.
And it's especially hard because like, you see their relationship and that those two characters have, and then to see how quickly Omni-Man just like can turn on a dime and like eviscerate his son is kind of,
well, especially the stuff with like the stuff he says about his wife and just like, oh, she's like a pet to me kind of thing, and just and like, I mean, her whole journey or arc in this in the stuff we read is just like, it's heartbreaking, right? The stuff she's going through and how she's trying to cope with it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like at the same time, going back and reading this, like it's a little unclear how like Omni-Man, it's a little unclear how much he's even convinced himself of it. like, because like he does like beat Invincible within like an inch of his life, but then he doesn't kill him, right? Like he just leaves at the end. And the whole time, like Mark is trying to say like, oh, well, you don't mean that. Like you're lying. You've lied about everything else. Like, how do I not know you're not lying about this? And he himself admits that like he did lose track of like his mission to conquer Earth. And so there is kind of a gray area to his character, at least at this point in the comic, about, you know, how much he's actually committed to that versus
and the way
any commitment to his wife and kid.
Yeah. And the way he talks about it though is like, you know, for a while there, I was sort of like, believe that, but it's such a small portion of his life because, you know, he lives for so many years. So
that is one of the interesting ways that the Superman analog is kind of deployed, because this does come up every once in a while in Superman stories that, you know, he will outlive probably Lois and Jimmy and Bruce and Diana and everybody else. But it's not something that they can ever actually grapple with in the DC comics, because they're like every 10 years they're like making the characters younger again and sort of resetting in that sense. So it is kind of like an interesting way to look at that, of how like you know, eventually he does get to a point where he realizes that like he's not aging, but you know, his wife is aging and the people in his life are aging. There's a tragic side to him. The book doesn't do, especially early on, and even later to an extent, doesn't really do him a lot of favors in terms of painting him in a positive light. But I don't know, like there are some redeeming qualities to his character, even when he, you know, does obviously horrible things.
And I mean, I think the turn is good because like he does really feel like a father who cares about his son, and you know, up until the point where he makes his big reveal, it seems like he does care about his wife too, and he clearly still cares about his son in there.
Well, I mean, you care about your cats, right? So I think he does care about her. It's just like not in the way that you know, a person would care about another person.
I mean, he doesn't see her as an equal, and he like literally can't. There's like, and he never will be able to, I assume.
Do you guys think the series needs that twist? Because in terms of it setting it apart from other stuff, I feel like it kind of does. Because otherwise it's just like, oh, it's a coming of age superhero story with, you know, I don't know how many stories we have about like a kid and their dad, actually. It's probably not that much, and especially like for a long period of time. But
well, someday we'll read Grant
I feel like the twist
Batman,
is needed.
Which...
Oh, true.
is about a kid and his dad. I agree. I think that I would have enjoyed, you know, both when I first read this and even reading it now, I still have that nagging thought of like, it would have been kind of fun to go maybe like 20 or 30 issues with, you know, get to meet the Guardians and like see how Robert Kirkman would have portrayed like the direct DC character analogs and stuff like that. I think there's an opportunity there that is lost, obviously, with this twist. But I do agree at the end of the day that what Kirkman decides to do in terms of immediately like shifting the focus onto a new set of characters who are, you know, they have sort of analogs. I mean, like the Mark to Peter Parker analog is pretty close in a lot of ways. You know, there's the detective who is basically the Question. You know, there are those other characters, but like moving into something that's more where where Kirkman has more like creative freedom to work with his own characters and paint on his own canvas, I think was a smart decision, both from a storytelling perspective, but also from the perspective of like establishing himself as a writer. That he wasn't just like trying to, you know, rip off, like for lack of a better term, rip off like existing IP and characters, and instead could like do his own thing with original characters and original stories. And so much of the story is about like, you know, the like Omni-Man species, and that does become like obvious. As you can probably surmise, like that becomes like a major plot point.
Back? What?
Yeah. The last time you see Omni-Man isn't in issue 11 or whatever.
That's crazy.
something that I really appreciate about Invincible as opposed to Watchmen, which I have read, and I haven't read The Boys, but I have watched a considerable amount of the TV show at this point, and I've seen some of what the art of the comic for The Boys looks like, and I've read horrible things on wikis that sometimes I do wish I had some brain bleach, but something that I appreciate about Invincible, like in comparison to both of these works, is that like Invincible still is like stylistically it's not trying to be that like realistic and gritty, like, and not that being realistic and gritty is bad, it's just I like that even though this is like a like more grounded take on a superhero book, and it does have this like super violence or whatever, it's also like everybody's in like brightly colored costumes, and like not everything has to kind of try to look like how it would if it were happening in the real world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And 100%. And I think part of that is that unlike some of the books we're comparing it to, like, you know, Watchmen and The Boys, and you know, other books out there, it's not Kirkman reacting to something. Like Watchmen is about, you know, Alan Moore's thesis that like superheroes are like intrinsically fascistic, and the genre leads there. And you know, The Boys is Garth Ennis like being in his feelings about 9/11. You know, like these books are about things that are much bigger than just what you see on the page.
Yeah.
In the case of Watchmen, for better, and in the case of The Boys, definitely for worse.
Oh, yeah.
But in the case of like Invincible, even though it is trading in those terms of like superhero comics, like Kirkman's not really trying to say something about superheroes or the genre writ large.
He's just telling an engaging story, right?
It's just sort of like, you know, like what if Superman was evil, but like not like with any sort of implications about that.
And it's not even trying to say that like, oh, Superman is unrealistic because XYZ, which is like, so like, it's not even like an Injustice situation where it's like, oh, Superman snap. It's just like, well, no, like what if Superman just, instead of coming from a dying race of Kryptonians, like what if he came from a race of people
that, on
like,
purpose,
galactic conquerors. Yeah, so it's just like a totally like different take on the character. And you know, I think in some ways that works out for Kirkman because he's able to tell a story that's like way more his own than some of those other books that some other like creator-owned sort of more independent superhero comics, which often, you know, even something I really enjoy like Jeff Lemire's Black Hammer, a lot of it does come back to like he's trying to like comment on superhero comics and the state of superhero comics and the industry and all of that. And he tells a great story in that as well, but like it's so heady that like you can't really give it to a first-time reader and be like, read Jeff Lemire's Black Hammer. They're not really going to get a lot of it. Whereas with this, it's like it's super accessible. It's for new readers.
I appreciate that. Like it is trying to be like a slightly more grounded version of a superhero story, but like not so grounded.
It's not even really. It's grounded in the sense that it's like more about the character drama than it is about the superhero. It's like there's so many issues where you see like it's like all like Mark and Eve and the sort of the early love triangle with, I think her name is Amber.
Yes.
Like there's that, and then like there's 2 pages where Mark goes out and on patrol with other superheroes and beats the shit out of like some supervillains.
Yeah.
But even that is not so atypical for superhero comics.
Yeah.
You know, that's
I guess
like that's why the Ultimate Spider-Man thing comes, and even like a lot of like, well, not this era of X-Men that was like contemporary with this, but like X-Men, like the Claremont X-Men book, and even later like the Jason Aaron X-Men books and stuff. Like that is a fundamental part of superhero comics at this point, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that at this time too, like you're looking at things published by Image Comics, and this is like I think a year after Why the Last Man started, and
at Vertigo.
I was, yeah, that's true, yeah. Just I guess independent stuff, but I somewhat independent. But I was a little bit worried just knowing that, like, okay, this came out in 2003. I've read stuff that's come out around that time that's really not aged well. Like specifically that era, like I feel like stuff in the 90s, you know what you're gonna get, 80s as well. But the early 2000s is just like,
yeah, I didn't actually realize that this started coming out in 2003 until I was making the notes for the show, because I just like didn't think to check. And I feel like I would have been much more concerned going in if I had known the year, because it really is like the first 5 years of the early 2000s, any comics that came out, like it's really a wild card as to what sort of content you may or may not encounter.
It is crazy because Eric Larson, who's known for like Savage Dragon, he's one of like the original Image Comics group, does like the intro for Volume 2. He like writes the foreword for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's actually true because I think Tom Brevoort does the foreword for Volume 3, and I think it continues after that with some of those early Image Comics guys who like talk about how like Kirk and Larson specifically talks about how like he knew Robert Kirkman because Kirkman was a huge fan of his Image stuff, which makes it all the more surprising that when you actually read Invincible, it is nothing like the sort of like 90s Image comics. Like I think even Kirkman would say like that's where his influences came from, but he produced something that is like very different, like it, and I think it's for the better. Like there's not like, no one says a slur in the first 3 volumes of this, which is like crazy for a book from 2003. It's like, when am I going to see the R slur? When is someone going to say the F word? Like one of these things has to be in here. I know, like it's just
the worst that happens is when William asks Mark to take him flying. Mark is like, "This is so."
Oh,
gay.
This is so yeah.
And like that's literally the worst. Like that I remember reading in these 3 volumes.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like it's kind of funny how Invincible has this reputation now for being this really like edgelord kind of thing, but at the beginning it wasn't. Like okay, it's violent, but like it's not. Yeah. It's not any more violent than a superhero comic. It's just that you actually see a little bit of blood and gold.
Actually, I was gonna kind of say something about that earlier. That like, it's not necessarily that. I guess it seems like Invincible is more grounded than other superhero comics, but only because like you're seeing what would, and I would say that like Invincible has like more blood than necessarily would be realistic, but like in terms of like regular superhero comics not seeing that much blood, like you're seeing what would be a more realistic amount of blood for the types of violence that superheroes are able to perpetrate.
Like I watched the clip of the twist from the end of season of episode 1, like while we were talking about it at the beginning.
Yeah.
And like the comic does get there in terms of gore, but it takes a while before the comic gets to that level of, which like I'm not against gore, but like it's just funny how much the reputation of this book has changed over time, given like you read this and you could give this to like, you could give this to your like middle school aged niece or nephew or whatever, like you could give this to a 12-year-old in the same bundle with like Ultimate Spider-Man and like the 80s like run of Teen Titans or whatever. Like this could be someone's intro to like superhero comics.
Honestly, yeah.
And now it has this reputation as being like, this is for grown-ups and it's edgy and violent and bad stuff happens. Which I wish it had never gotten that reputation. Well, it's Kirkman's fault that it has that reputation. It's not unearned, but it's
sure.
Things were better. We used to have good superhero comics.
We used to have proper comics.
Yeah. I mean, we still do, but not, not as many.
before we go to the next question, I have to pee really bad because I drank an entire beverage while we've been recording.
There was something really funny in the comic when the watch. You can go, Emily. This is just...
No, I want to hear what you have to say first.
Oh, okay. It's the guy who's the stand-in for the question, which is, the stand-in for that Rorschach type character who's like so smart and doing all the clues. And after like everybody knows that Omni-Man like did this murder and left, he's like, I think I know who the person who killed the Justice League stand-in is. And everyone's like, yeah, we saw the news. He's like, fuck. Because he like clearly doesn't like check the news or go on the internet. He's doing everything like sneakily behind.
Really funny,
which makes him a great like stand-in for the question, because the question is probably not a guy who like reads the newspaper.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Invincible occasionally repeats panels or reuses its own art to the point that there is a joke about it in a third volume. How do you guys feel about this? Does it bother you? Like what are your...
I didn't even notice it at all until they made the joke, and then I was like, oh, okay. Like, if you were someone who's drawing monthly comics, on a monthly schedule, I'm fine if you reuse half the pages. Like, whatever. Like, you know what? That's fine. I
agree with that. If they don't want artists to reuse pages, then you should be okay with waiting longer between issue releases. I'm fine with it.
100%.
I think the joke is funny when they do it. I think it's like kind of weirdly shoehorned, because that whole sequence of him going to the comic book signing is like, feels kind of out of place, but it's a setup for a joke that I like, and I don't mind that they reuse.
It almost feels like someone won a contest and was like, "You get into the Invincible book. Here you go." But there's a joke with it.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily mind it. I noticed it before the joke was made, but like I was just, again, like if you're putting out that much every month, like, or whatever, like you do what you can. You work smarter, not harder, as far as I'm concerned. But I think the joke is funny, but I also like, part of me kind of wishes that they like hadn't acknowledged it and just did it, like just kind of like own it, like, and I guess like making a joke about it is also like kind of owning it in a way. But I don't know, I like, that was something when I was skimming through people talking about the first 3 volumes of this comic. I saw a couple complaints about the like reuse of panels and stuff like that.
Was that also on Goodreads?
It's always on Goodreads. So I just
assume people on Goodreads have like 1.5 brain cells on average.
Oh, 100%. I just, like if I see more than one person complain about a thing, I'm at least interested to hear what you guys think.
Feels like a CinemaSins-ass complaint to me, if I'm being honest. Like, if you find something real to complain about, like,
yeah,
especially because like, so much of the time, like you don't need to, if you're gonna have a long, like a 1 or 2 page scene where like characters are talking to each other and their facial expressions are, all the student changes their facial expressions, like why would you make more work for yourself if it's not necessary?
No, absolutely.
It's not like if you compare it to other visual mediums like film or TV, like if there's going to be a sequence where characters are having a conversation, like they're probably going to have, like, obviously there are some cases where this isn't true, where you would want to move the camera around and get different shots for different parts of the conversation or whatever. But like, there's plenty of times where like the camera is just still pointed at somebody's face and they're just reacting. Like, I don't understand. Like, I know that like I've heard this complaint deployed before, and like so I know like comic book readers are sensitive to it. There's always like, but it is one of those things where it really feels like people who have like no artistic talent or skill like will just complain about people who do being lazy
110%
because they think it's easy. And to those people, as somebody with no artistic talent, like, I don't know, maybe you should try drawing a monthly comic book before you start, bitching.
No.
That's not to say you can't complain about bad art in comics. There's plenty of bad art in comics, but like reusing panels is like so far from anything I would consider to be like you know, lazy or bad.
Yeah, you have like there are actual like people tracing things in comics that like you.
I mean, we read Darth Vader like for the last episode where, you know, and that's not the artist's fault either. That I think was an editorial thing that they were told.
I was thinking more. But it wasn't. There was some guy that like that has been like caught over and over like tracing shit for comics, but I don't remember who the fuck I'm talking about. I'm sure like as soon as this episode is over, I'll remember who I was talking about. But anyway, yeah, no, I don't really give that much of a shit. I think, you know, like I said, work smarter, not harder. Like putting out monthly comics, putting out comics on any schedule is difficult. So, you know, like you do what you can. But I do have a real complaint, which is why does Robert Kirkman feel the need to cram so many words into every single individual speech bubble?
This is a complaint that I remember, that I know is very common in like the comic book, like people who read comics. I remember this complaint about Invincible a lot.
Look, it's not even that the dialogue in Invincible is difficult to read. It's just like when I physically look at the page and I see that many words in a single speech bubble, like there is a part of my brain that's like, oh God.
It's one of those things where like fundamentally, like there's like a kind of a rule of thumb with superhero comics that you shouldn't do that because, you know, the appeal is like you have these flashy characters with cool costumes who in theory are like fighting cool shit. So you shouldn't be like wasting page space on text, which I'm sympathetic with to a degree because I also think that, but also I think that a lot of times, you know, when people make that complaint, their complaint isn't so much like the structural one about like the nature of superhero comics. It's more that the text on the page is bad. And in this case, for the most part, it's not. Yeah. But I do agree that like there is a problem where like Kirkman's characters often do talk in paragraphs, which, you know, it's not that that's an unnatural cadence necessarily, but you do have a good point that like to a degree, some of these people are just like yapping for what, if they were talking in person, like what would be like 3 minutes on end. Yeah. And I know I do that all the time on the podcast, but like hopefully in conversations with people, I'm not, you know, monopolizing the time like that.
It's just like, I don't know, like I feel like there could be just some way artistically to break up, because a lot of pages in Invincible don't really have that many panels per page. I feel, and I know this would be like making more work for the artist, and I'm like sympathetic to that, but like there could be a way to like visually break up some of these like big walls of text in speech bubbles to where it doesn't just look like I'm reading a big, like I'm reading a paragraph next to a close-up of someone's face because they're talking.
So this is you kind of end up in a catch-22 with this scenario though, because like one of the like sort of formal elements that is often used by comic book writers is that they put these big text boxes and like long conversations and expository dialogue like in the middle of big action scenes, so there's something else going on in the page.
Yeah, okay. But I don't know that I
also sucks because then like you end up in this position where like I want to see the cool fight scene. I don't want to have like the page, like this is something that like we used to criticize a lot on the old podcast when we were reading monthly books, was that like there's some cool art going on this page. I wish I could fucking see it because of all the text boxes.
I get that.
So it's like, it's kind of like you're kind of in a bind either way, because the alternative is this, which like when you're reading a superhero comic and you just have like page after page of dialogue, you're like, all right, can we, you know, come on, let's get to the, let's get past this. But so much of it comes down to just like, am I enjoying what I'm reading?
Yeah.
And I think Kirkman's dialogue is good enough that I it's not something that I'm like consciously thinking of or that's taking me out of it. At least personally, I know that's like not going to be the
No,
case for everyone.
I will admit, like I said, like it's not even that the dialogue is like difficult to read or like not enjoyable to read. It's just like it just visually, like when I look at a page and like it's mostly just like close-ups on two people talking to each other and there's like one big text bubble in the middle of the panel. Like there, I just wish there was maybe like there's got to be some middle ground between that and like having big expository dialogue in the middle of action scenes.
It does kind of get to like some of the writers of like this era, like Bendis, Vaughn, Kirkman, like were trained as like screenwriters as opposed to comic book writers. And like when you're a screenwriter, you can write this long dialogue because like the characters are actually moving on the screen. Like their faces are moving, they're walking around, the camera can move. Whereas like, you know, you can portray movement in a comic through the art.
No, actually,
but at the end of the day, you're looking at static images. So it's a little bit.
You saying that he was trained as a screenwriter like makes a lot of sense. Actually.
I'm pretty sure I should probably actually fact check that, but I'm pretty sure that's true. I'm pretty sure that's true.
That would make a lot of sense. Like,
and it's one of those, it's one of those things where
a lot of times you can tell when someone has like made the jump from like writing novels to writing comics because they do too much dialogue, but like,
and it's really bad, yeah.
But there's something about the way that like Kirkman's dialogue comes off slightly less bad than like a novelist writing.
I will say the novelist to comic thing is less that there's too much dialogue and more that there's too much set dressing and explanation of like you see something on the page and a telltale sign that like it's a fucking novelist is they're describing what's in the art in a text box, which is annoying as fuck. Screenwriters, it's the opposite. It's very little of that because they come from a visual medium, so they know that like that's being portrayed, like that people are seeing what's happening, so you don't need to tell them, oh, there's like a, you know, wide shot of a planet or whatever. You don't need that, but they do put a lot of dialogue in their books. So it's one of those things where like comics are very close to novels and they're very close to film and television, but they're not actually either of those things.
100%.
And so like you get writers who come from those things and are good writers, but are a little bit uncomfortable. And so there's like elements of comics that are harder for them to like fully pull off.
Unfortunately, it seems like people don't respect comics enough as a medium that like when they are making the transition to it, they don't like take into account the things that you need to do to transition from one medium
I will say
I
will say for Kirkman, I don't think it's that he doesn't respect the medium.
No. I meant more
so much as
that's more of a general statement. That has nothing to do with Kirkman specifically.
I think in the case of Kirkman, it's just more that he's doing what he knows.
Yeah.
And over time, I think he gets better. It's I would say it's a little bit different from like, especially, I feel like every week I look at new books and there's like a new DC book written by some random screenwriter and it's the worst thing you've ever read. And those are definitely more like some guy trying to get a paycheck or being like, it would be cool if someone let me write Batman.
Well, yeah, no, like the thing is that Kirkman is also like, he is also really good at writing comics.
Oh yeah, look, from like probably like I don't know until like 2010, Kirkman was in God mode when it came to comics. Like he wrote like those the early issues of Invincible are great. Like Walking Dead is really good for at least 40 or so issues. Like he is a very good comic book writer. Like I think that this gets lost because that's not the thing that people talk about when they talk about Kirkman anymore for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
But like Kirkman is a great comic book writer and wrote a lot of really great comics in the early 2000s and like there's a reason he kind of has a reputation. He does.
Yeah, there's a reason that The Walking Dead was so popular and continues to be so popular.
Yeah, 100%.
Like it wouldn't be the media juggernaut it is otherwise.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But Yeah, so we've kind of talked about this. Neither of you have really watched the animated show.
No. I'm a little surprised that, given Kirkman's like success with The Walking Dead and everything, that they took him this long to adapt it into something. I mean, animated does seem to be the way to go. I guess The Boys pulled off live action, but I think like I think animated is definitely like just fits it really well.
Yeah, I don't I would not want to see Invincible live action, I don't think.
Superhero stuff in live action in general, like, I'm not saying it fails 100% of the time. There's a lot of great live action superhero movies, but it's really hard to translate the things that make superhero comics so cool to live action without making like these massive bloated CGI projects that look like shit.
Especially like if you're trying to go for like a series as opposed to like a movie.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just look at a screenshot from like Mark Millar's Jupiter's Legacy TV show or Netflix show. Like, it looks terrible. The Boys pulls it off because there's like a sort of it's kind of, there's a certain degree of camp to The Boys that makes it so that like if the costumes look a little fake, it's fine because they're not really
because
supposed
they
to
are a
look
little
natural.
fake.
They are a little fake, right? Like The Boys work, like The Boys pulls off live action in large part because like of the tone and like what the book is. Invincible would not, I don't think, be very well suited for it. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
I watched like from that one clip I watched earlier in like one of the trailers. Emily's right that it does look like the recent DC movies. It moves a little better. Like, it's definitely not as like,
I meant
you
like
know,
from like an art style, not necessarily an animation.
Yeah, 100%. But you nailed it with the art style, which is in my book not like necessarily a compliment, but it doesn't look horrible.
Yeah,
It's a shame for something, and this is a problem I often find myself coming back to with comic book adaptations. Is like my biggest barrier to entry with them isn't necessarily that like they're poorly written or anything like that. It's just that the visual, they don't translate the visual style, and so many of the comics that I love in large part because they have unique and interesting visual styles. And it's not Ryan Otley's style on
oh yeah,
on,
no,
on the
not
screen,
at
so.
all.
Not that I need them to be 1-to-1, but like it is a little bit of a bummer that it's not stylized in that way.
No, I can get, I can understand that. Like I find the visual style of the Invincible animated series, I find it pleasant to look at. So, you know, like I don't really have a problem with it, but like I can't say that I wouldn't want it to be something a little more unique like Ryan Otley's style. But yeah, I like the TV show. I think that it's pretty good. Steven Yeun does a really good job as the voice of Mark. And
That's kind of funny that he's in both of the. I didn't know
Robert
it was him.
Kirkman
He's in
guy.
both of the Kirkman.
oh, I didn't.
Because he's Glenn in The Walking Dead.
I didn't even. I literally at no point have I made that connection, even though I knew he was also Glenn in The Walking Dead. Yeah,
maybe Steven Yeun and Robert Kirkman are like drinking buddies or something. Like maybe they hang out. I would love that for them.
that
honestly,
that sounds fun. But yeah, like I mean, all of the animated all of the voice cast for the animated show is honestly like super fucking good. J.K. Simmons as Omni Man is literally like god tier perfect casting. Like
that's great casting. Yeah.
It's seriously, he's so good. He's so good. Like, and I mean, like, just J.K. Simmons in general is so good, but like, he's just like, just perfectly cast.
You're selling me more on the animated show.
Honestly, yeah, like
talking about the voice cast.
It's just like I mean, it's well animated. I think the voice cast does a really good job. They change the Amber character so that like she and Mark have more of like a pre-established dating relationship, and also if you somehow have managed to miss, they like really changed her character design where she's like black now instead of like a generic like white blonde bob cut hair girl, and that caused a lot of stupid bullshit online. People really don't like the Amber character in the animated show because they are racist and misogynist, and that sucks.
It also sounds like she has a bigger role because Amber is not that much of a factor, even beyond like what we read. Like she's
like she's actually like an active part because like she and Mark are like dating at the.
They do in the comic as well, but
no, but I mean like at the I mean like at the start,
beginning, yeah,
okay. They like. It, unless I'm mistaken, which I don't think I am in this, but like they have like
you've never been mistaken.
No, I've never been mistaken ever in my life. But they have like an established dating relationship at the time, so like she's a much bigger presence than in the comic, but also like because they made her a bigger character, and also she's a woman of color. People don't like her, and that sucks. But they're wrong, and that's fine. Plenty of people have bad opinions on the internet, but I like the Invincible animated show. Even though I haven't kept up with season 2, as we are recording, it is on hiatus. It's going to be on mid-season hiatus until early January. But I am looking forward to watching more of the show and seeing what they do with the comic. I may even read more of the comic, who knows? But I guess that also that goes into, I have heard that the Invincible comic gets bad at a certain point, or at least is not as good. Or I've heard a lot of opinions, but mostly that mostly not great. So
tell us about the moment, Jean-Luc.
Jean-Luc, what is
okay?
This
so
infamous...
it's not one moment. Well, it is one moment that I think is where a lot of people, it was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Sure,
but I want to be clear that for a while, at some point, this book becomes, how bad can we make Mark Grayson's life? Like, how much can we fuck this guy up and traumatize him and destroy him and make his life horrible? And it culminates in him being raped by a member of Omni-Man's species, who like strips him and rapes him, and then is impregnated with his child, who he then ends up kind of raising. It's the faces you're making are accurate to how I think most people who at some point liked Invincible felt when that happened. And it was like the culmination of like all of the bad shit that Robert Kirkman had done to the character, to Mark's character up to that point. And that was like an
adequate moment for that slip, because that does feel like a Mark Millar moment.
It's a huge bummer because there is this, it's gradual at first, and the tone shift is gradual at first, and it's fine for a little while because the book does take a darker turn, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it gets to a point where it does become, it falls off that cliff and never comes back, unfortunately.
I hate that.
And that's the thing that, like, that's why, like, when everyone was talking about, like, oh my God, like, there's something really bad in Invincible season 1, and like nobody was spoiling because it was just when it came out, and I'm like, did they do that in the first? That's what I thought people were referencing, because like the Omni-Man twist is like, I was like, everyone knows the Omni-Man twist. That's like the core of the book. Like,
I think it's just
shocking to anyone.
I think it's just the fact that
that's shocking to people is that, and so it was a weird disconnect.
I think it's the fact that they went so like graphic and long with the reveal in that first episode of Invincible.
I'm watching the fight, and the speedster is like, he's getting his head like squished in, and he's punching him so hard that he's broken his hand, and he's still punching. It's
it's graphic and brutal, but it's like not, it's And that is much more in line with some of what happens later on in Invincible.
I don't.
Still,
do you think they'll do it? Do you think they will? If the TV show keeps going, you think they're going to have that scene?
Yes.
I mean,
because
maybe, yeah.
This happens. Invincible ends about. I don't remember. This is in the early hundreds of issues, and Invincible ends
in 186 or 190 or something.
144.
Oh, I'm thinking of Walking Dead.
Walking Dead is 193, I think. Invincible ends at 144, and because of the proximity to the end, I think this is something that Robert Kirkman probably still stands by. I know some things about what happens after this. My impression is that it doesn't get better, and I think that based on Robert Kirkman's reaction that Emily mentioned earlier to what they do at the end of what the Omni-Man, how they portray the Omni-Man twist scene, I think probably this is something that will happen in the show.
He was super, from what I remember, he was like super gleeful about like how edgy it was that they ended episode 1 with this clip.
Yeah, I like I said, I think Robert Kirkman has written a lot of really good comics, but he becomes really infatuated with edginess. This is also around the time that they kill Glenn and they do the Negan arc in The Walking Dead. Like these things are lined up. Like it was very much like he did these things around the same time. And I don't know. Like I don't think. My impression of both Invincible and The Walking Dead is that like neither of them got better after the points where they just like sort of threw themselves off the edgelord chasm. So it's kind of a bummer because there's so much good Invincible, and it sours it for a lot of people, like myself included. Like I mentioned up front, like I was like, I don't know if I'll like Invincible going back to it, but I did. I went back to it and I still love those first few issues. And I think I'm going to keep reading it. I might finally finish it just out of curiosity now that I have been reading the good stuff again. And I remember it's good for a long time. So it's a shame that Kirkman kind of wrote himself into that corner, but
yeah, I read up to volume 4 and it gets kind of silly, but in a cool way.
Yeah. I also read volume 4 because I was just, in the midst of it and enjoying it. And I volume 4 also held up.
Just like, parallel Earths, multiple versions of the same person. Like,
it really does take a while for it to fall off. There is a lot of good Invincible. So like, there's definitely a point where like you can kind of just like stop reading and you will have like a positive impression of Invincible. If you go too far, it's
what I will say is the impression that I get from, I mean, like, I only watched one season of The Walking Dead, so I can't really speak to, like, that much of where Kirkman is at, like, for writing for TV wise, but like I get the impression that like as far as the edginess, it seems like he is willing to keep embracing like the violence edgy, maybe not necessarily like the like sexual edgy. So there's like realistically a chance that when it comes to like adapting that part of the comic, that like things might not go exactly the way that they were written.
There's also a way you can there is also a way you can do it where you can still have that scene and it feels like you actually tell a like good story around it rather than it just coming across as like being exploitative and done just for the sake of shock value, which that's not the only scene in Invincible towards like the back half of the book where it does stuff like that. So, but it doesn't exactly inspire confidence that like the way that how well the that the way the Omni-Man scene is portrayed. I don't know. It's hard to know. Like they should probably steer clear of it in the animated show, but there is a way to do it that isn't as bad. But I would not really trust people to I would not really trust anyone with that because it's very hard. So who knows?
No, I don't disagree. I just like it seems like just with the way that like things are taken like culturally in this sort of moment in time, it seems more likely that for like a television audience that they might steer away from like things of a sexual nature that are that boundary crossing versus like the like extensive violence of like murdering all of the Justice League. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
So, who knows? But I am also kind of interested in reading more Invincible. So like I would be down for doing a follow-up episode where we read a few more volumes of Invincible. I know we have some other stuff in the tank before we get to do that, but I would be down. So that sounds like fun. Yeah. And I think that about it being bad was my last question. So
kind of a dour note to end on, but
but not as well. A little bit, I guess. Do you guys hear that sound? Do you hear the sound of the Doomsday Clock? This is a new segment that we're doing, and the Doomsday Clock signals that is the part of the show where we highlight something that made us cry this week because it is crying in the book club, and it is time for us to cry. So, boys, what's something that made you cry this week?
Huh.
I have a thing if someone needs me to go first.
Go ahead.
Okay, the thing that made me cry, this is gonna shock absolutely no one, and is sort of a preview for our next episode. The Scott Pilgrim anime, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, specifically the moment at the end of the show where the song Scott Pilgrim by Plumtree plays. Really, I was not expecting that to happen, and that just like for some reason hit me very emotionally. I say some reason. The real reason is that I put that song on the playlist that I made for one of my partners when we started dating. So and it's like the first song on the playlist. So I just like was not expecting to hear the song Scott Pilgrim by Plumtree out of context, but I guess the Scott Pilgrim anime is the most context that it could be in. So, but anyway, I really like Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. We're going to do a bonus episode about it. But that moment in particular, made me really emotional. So that's my cry space for this episode.
Scott Pilgrim Takes Off made me emotional because it sucks.
Fuck off. I'm going to kill you with my bare hands.
I like Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is pretty cool. I like the part where he took off. I don't know. I haven't seen it.
That's also my favorite part, is the part where he took off.
I haven't seen that part yet. Maybe I'll see it.
I have seen it. It's pretty
No,
good.
You've seen that part. It's in like the first episode.
What a twist.
So someone else who cried this week.
I cried this week. Yeah, so a few weeks ago, I guess at this point, we read, that's the word. We read a book called Tintin and the Blue Lotus, a good old book from the olden days. And I recall that they released a Tintin game, which is an adventure game. You're kind of going through and you're being the journalist. You have your dog Snowy by your side, going on adventures. And this was adapting Tintin and the Cigars of the Pharaoh, which is the book that actually leads into Tintin and the Blue Lotus. So I was like, oh my gosh, I need to buy this game, being a Tintin head. Before I did do research, and the game was released and there were no reviews out. And I was like, why would there be no reviews out? Because the developers put out a statement a few days before, and they're like, the game is not finished, but please buy it. We will do many updates in order to make the game finished. We're also already working on the next game, Tintin and the Blue Lotus, so please support us. It was just like, what? What do you mean? And then against my bet, I wasn't going to buy it, but then I saw it on sale for half off, and I'm like, okay, well, I must. And I've been playing. I'm probably about an hour and a half of gameplay in, and I played a little bit with Jean-Luc, and it's bad. It's bad.
Unforged.
It looked miserable when Alex was streaming it to me in Discord, and it looked like one of the most horrible ways you could spend time. So
the humor is good, the charm's nice, people talking is good. The gameplay, it's either
my favorite part of the people talking is when you hear voice lines of the people in the next room that you're not supposed to hear yet in the room that you're in, because the game is held together by spit and glue.
Cutscenes. Yeah. There's been a lot of things. And the thing is, there's a lot of bugs. Like I needed to find a crate to stand on to finish this part of the level, and it was just invisible. Like I knew there was a crate in the room because I used it earlier, and then when I needed to use it, I walked up to the space and nothing was there, and then I clicked the button and it was like press R1, which is the button that would show up if it was there, and it was like, oh, it's just invisible, like it's just out. And then when I broke out of there, it was supposed to be a ship, and it was just blue, and then my character. That was the whole thing going on.
Oh my
but
God.
Beyond that, the actual gameplay, it's all quick time events for combat or running, and they're very long. Or it's like stealth missions where you're either playing as Tintin or Tintin's dog.
Mm-hmm.
The dog stealth missions looked like I would throw my controller out the window if I had to play one of those.
But I did get farther, and I got to the actual pyramid stuff, and there's actually cool puzzles. So they clearly the first part of the game, they were like, this is not where our budget is going, this is not where our time is going. It's gotten better, but we'll see. I hear there's a game-breaking bug 20 minutes from where I am, so I don't know how far I'll get. But that's my long space of crying.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yep.
Jean-Luc, what made you cry?
Being forced to watch Alex play the new Tintin game. No.
No.
I saw a movie called The Holdovers, which I
want to see this.
It's really good. I actually didn't think I was gonna like it because I hadn't seen any trailers or anything, but I saw it was getting some buzz on Twitter, and then I looked at the plot synopsis and the cast and the director and stuff, and I was like, I don't know if this will be my thing. But I went and saw it because it was getting really positive reviews, and it is very funny. And it is also very heartfelt. I cried, I laughed, etc. The full spectrum of emotions. It's very good. Paul Giamatti's performance is incredible. He's extremely funny.
See, I knew Paul Giamatti was in it, and I kept hearing people say that it was really good. So that's all I've got.
I don't know where they pulled the actor who plays the kid from. I went to his IMDb, and it's nothing except The Holdovers. I don't know where they found this guy, but he is incredible.
Incredible.
Davine Joy Randolph, who has been in a few things lately, the last few years, is great. It's very fun, but it's very also very heartfelt kind of holiday season movie. So I highly recommend it. I think it's probably still in theaters in some places. It's still in theaters here. I think it's
still in theaters where I am.
I would definitely recommend. Yeah, I would definitely recommend going and seeing it in theater. It's not like a movie that really benefits from being seen in theaters, but I would like it to make a lot of money, as much money as possible at the box office, because it's a good movie. And going to theaters is awesome. I didn't cry during Godzilla -1, but that was fucking sick as hell too.
Oh, that's also in theaters near me. So
they extended the theatrical release of it too.
I just heard about that.
The U.S. theatrical release, so people should go see it. I assume I'll also probably cry again this weekend when I go see The Boy and the Heron, but which also theatrical release this weekend. Let's go.
I hear it sucks.
Eat shit,
yeah, shut the fuck you, Alex. Not all of us can live in places that have major international film festivals.
The funny thing was, I was in Japan when Godzilla -1 was coming out too. So
you could have seen it. Yeah, Alex told me the story of how he and his fiance were going to go see Godzilla -1, and then they were like, this probably sucks.
It wouldn't have
not
been
the
English
reasoning.
subtitles.
It was like I hear there's a lot of like there's a real human like personal like a lot of talking stuff going on. So like I still think it would have been cool to see Godzilla in the theater though. You know, I will still see.
You
him
still
in the theater,
can,
but like,
but it is. You do really want the subtitles for that movie, unless you're fluent in Japanese, in which case, you know,
I don't think I am.
anyway.
You would not get subtitles in a Japanese theater.
I'm gonna be honest though, the parts where Godzilla fucks shit up are just pretty cool. So
yeah, I'm pretty hyped.
I found that hard to believe that you would not be able to find English subtitled movies in Japan.
Oh, well, no, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it would depend on the movie. I don't think for Godzilla -1 you would have an easy time finding English.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't be easy, but
like, would it be impossible? Maybe not. But like, just in Japan, like most things are not set up for people who do not speak Japanese.
It's like, yeah, I mean, things are. I mean, in the major cities, I feel like it's like very manageable and stuff, but it's not like catered to you, which is it's fair. It's
doable, but like it's definitely not set up for you to navigate. Like,
didn't we make them a client state after World War II? Can't we exert some cultural influence over there?
That's America. Am I right?
That's what Godzilla -1 is about.
Heck yeah!
That's what I hear.
No, I don't actually believe that. I denounce the things that I just said.
No, too late. You can't do that.
They're condemned.
If you would like to follow this show on the internet, you could do that at Crying Book Club on Twitter. You should rate and review us 5 stars on your podcasting platform of choice if they allow you to rate and review things. Jean-Luc can be found on Twitter at Mountain Dew Liker or on Letterboxd at JL Botbill. Alex can be found on Twitter at Alex Hansiak, and I can be found many places: Twitter at Impandanata, Letterboxd, and Twitch Pandabor. The following podcast: Imagine Me and Utena, the Fresh Podcast Market, and That Looks Terrible.
I saw there was some Utena drama.
Yeah, so just the brief thing is that so the new H-Bomber Guy video came out, and at least half of the video is dedicated to taking down one specific YouTuber by the name of James Somerton, who did queer analysis videos that were almost entirely all plagiarized. And specifically, the reason that this became of interest to Utena Twitter is that James Somerton had an unreleased Patreon exclusive video about Revolutionary Girl Utena that, by all accounts, sucks absolute shit, and I'm going to be covering it on Imagine Me and Utena because I'm a glutton for punishment, and even though I'm going to dread watching this video, this was my idea, so I have no one to blame but myself. So, that's the end of our show, guys. Goodbye.
That is the end of our show. Goodbye.
Bye.